Soto. I'm the Manager of Programs and Inclusion at IBEAM, and I'm going to hand it over to our Executive Director, Roderick Schrock. Take it away, Roddy.
Thanks so much, Jay, and welcome to all of you to day 2 of What Comes Next, Artist Interventions in Technology. Today will be hosted by Jerron Herman. It's my pleasure to welcome you. I'm Roderick Schrock, Executive Director here at IBEAM, and I would like to start by describing myself for any guests who are blind or low vision. This description was penned for me by my partner, the writer June Oluchi Lee. I have brown and gray hair, cut short but floppy on top of my head, as well as brown and gray stubble on my cheeks and around my lips. I have freckles on my face and light skin. I don't wear eyeglasses, but I have thick eyebrows. I would also like to start with an access check and to orient you to the virtual room. There are a number of IBEAM staff members supporting today's event. Please feel free to reach out in the chat box should you need anything or have any technical difficulties getting connected. Kemi is here to assist with any access needs or questions and is also our virtual door person. Please note, we are keeping an eye out for Zoom crashers and trolls. Should anyone co-opt the gathering or use derogatory language, they will be kicked out. Today's gathering is being captioned. Hello to Dana, our captioner for this event. We also have ASL provided by Rebecca and Veronica, who are all here from LC Interpreting. Thank you so much for helping us out today. Mad will be posting directions in the chat box on how to make captions and ASL visible to you if they are not already, as well as other helpful information. Due to the limited amount of time we have together today, we do need to keep the program running on time, so we'll be taking questions in the chat box during the program for the artists, so feel free to add your questions there throughout the program. For those of you who are getting to know IBEAM for the first time, our mission is to center artists in the invention and design of our shared future. We're committed to the idea that artists are a necessary part of not just imagining, but also creating a more humane future, particularly as our digital lives further merge with lived experience. We strive to enable people to think creatively and critically about technology's effect on society by nurturing artists who are engaging and wrestling with the profound changes happening globally. Our newest initiative, Rapid Response for a Better Digital Future, represents IBEAM's vision accelerated. This week, every day, we are celebrating artists from all over the world who are doing some of the most inventive and groundbreaking work to push society forward, clearing paths towards a more just future. I am truly honored to have launched this program with this group of artists and to further support their visions, investigating the deep present, illuminating the near future, and imagining worlds to come, drawing a bright line from idea to impact. And it is with profound gratitude that I wish to thank our generous supporters in this initiative. The enthusiasm and fearlessness with which the Henry Luce and Andrew W. Mellon Foundations in particular supported this program from inception to realization is beyond anything I've ever experienced before. I wish to extend personal thanks to Mariko Silver and Elizabeth Alexander for their leadership in particular. Additionally, I'd like to thank the Jerome Foundation, which has been a longtime funder of our residency program. At the onset of COVID, they generously allowed us to pivot our resources for the launch of Rapid Response. And to the board of directors at IBEAM, I extend my deepest thanks for your support in so many quantifiable and unquantifiable arenas. Finally, IBEAM is indebted to the longstanding visionary support of the Atlantic Foundation and the New York Council on the Arts. We are also pleased to acknowledge the support of the Beatrice Snyder Foundation and the O'Grady Foundation. Thank you to all of our donors who believe in our work and our artists. I want to note that some of today's material may not be appropriate for young children. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Jerron Herman, who will be hosting today's gathering after sharing a little more about his work with you. Jerron Herman is an interdisciplinary artist creating through dance, text, and visual storytelling. He's based in New York City. Jerron was born and grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, where he began his career pursuing performance and playwriting. In 2009, he moved to New York City to study dramatic writing at the Tisch School of the Arts at NYU. And continuing his dream of crafting stories to be performed, he then studied media, culture, and the arts with an emphasis in art history and playwriting at the King's College, where he graduated in 2013. While in school, he was discovered by a choreographer who led him to audition for Heidi Latsky quickly becoming a key member of her company. Jerron has performed at venues such as Lincoln Center and the Whitney Museum of Art, resulting in the New York Times calling him the inexhaustible Mr. Herman. As a strong advocate for disabled athletes and performers, he has been a featured model for both Tommy Hilfiger and Nike. His performances have begun to shed light on an often overlooked niche of performance. He currently sits on the board of trustees at Dance USA and is a proud member of the Disabled List and WITH with brainchildren of innovative thought leader Liz Jackson. As a writer, Jerron was a finalist for the inaugural Lark Play Development Lab Apothete Playwriting Fellowship, and he was also recently nominated for the prestigious United States Artists Fellowship in Dance. Prior to starting the conversation today, Jerron was speaking to some of us on staff and suggested that we all try to perform a little less in our Zoom presentations today. And taking that to heart, I'd like to encourage us all to ask questions, turn off your mic if you like, get up, walk around, and take advantage of the kind of sharing of the stage that these online platforms allow for us. And without further ado, it's with great enthusiasm that I turn over to today's proceedings to you, Jerron. Thank you, and thank you all for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Roddy. It's such an honor to be here. I'm Jerron Herman, as Roddy said, a disabled dancer and writer. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a dark-skinned Black man with short locks and a mustache. I'm wearing a cream-colored ribbed polo, and I'm sitting in front of a stark white wall. I had the pleasure of reviewing phase 1 applications for this open call. Admittedly, I'm quite analog, but over the process of reading remarkable projects, I realized I too sense patterns and solve difficult equations, though corporeally. Identifying the kismet between the flesh and the cyber optic network is crucial for the betterment of both. Here lies my interest, finding the humanity and longevity in these projects, and this is the foundation for today's session, increasing accessibility of online platforms. The role of access has been historically a function of broadening exposure to and gaining a grasp of a dominant culture. By understanding certain languages, definitions, achieving physical entry into spaces, or demonstrating cultural competency, one has been deemed as successful. Whereas we use access as a catch-all to describe entry for marginalized people, capital A access is already a defined culture that includes care practices and ideologies that enable authentic engagement. It is providing ASL interpretation in a meeting. It is captioning your Instagram video. It is also allowing folks to roam, take a break, and create real-time parameters. It's a sliding scale for pay for events. It's transportation to and from a space. Access can be more dynamically understood as welcoming, a nebulous but thoughtful intention to ensure wide participation. Writer Mia Mingus calls it access intimacy to indicate the partnership between parties, this fluid consent in creating the container. There's no one way or end to accessibility. Disability justice is a helpful lens here as it uplifts the untapped intelligences of disabled, sick, BIPOC, and queer folks by making their ideologies legible and actionable. Disability justice is a political ideation coined by the Bay Area disabled-led art collective Sins Invalid, and they have an accompanying set of 10 principles that include pillars from cross-movement solidarity to anti-capitalist politics. And I encourage all of you to research and get to know them. So that's what's so exciting about this session. We're broadcasting how technologists, creatives, and advocates are acting to increase welcoming online through radical reformation. That gets to the heart of what I-Beam's Open Call has been about. These projects also are all curiously embrace the analog, thank you, of being present as they create digital platforms. This too is access, upholding the many intelligences that are possible. The presentations today include disabled people and folks who have already interwoven disability justice principles into their process because they recognize its benefits. Wherever you are on the spectrum of disability identity, The lens is available, accessible, as a means to create your wider world. Today, let's engage in that access intimacy. So again, I'll encourage you to feel free to get comfortable as you engage with these lovely 6 projects. We begin with our first fellow, Morgen Bromell, who's a founder and technologist working to make tech more accessible to people of color through justice-based initiatives and tech activism. Bromell is creating a design guide and tool list that will assist designers, creators, and developers of other platforms, apps, and websites to include and center people of any gender or no gender, looking to utilize their project or online space. The key things they are working with are reimagining social spaces for more equity and protection of digital rights. I give you Morgen Bromell.
Hi, my name is Morgen Bromell, and I'm a Black, queer, non-binary artist, technologist, and the founder of Thirst. Thirst is a dating app for queer people, born out of the frustration of dealing with binary, gendered, hetero-centered dating apps and social platforms. I struggled for years to find apps that allowed me to self-designate as non-binary and also keep me from being seen, fetishized, and harassed. It was clear to me that I wasn't the person in mind when user cases or user stories were mapped out in the design and development stages. I started thinking about all the fundamental ideological shifts required that ultimately lead to me feeling comfortable dating online or signing up for various social media sites. Eventually, I began creating my own platform, modeled after what I felt was a more holistic approach to how we display or show our experiences online, our true and full selves. Thirst pillars are gender inclusion and accessibility as it pertains to gender identity and sexuality, as well as unraveling desirability while bolstering intra-community safety and security. We were the first dating app of its kind, allowing people of any or no gender to create a profile and connect with other people. The support was overwhelming, and our popularity within the queer and trans communities grew simply through word of mouth and referrals. We realized that so many marginalized people weren't using mainstream platforms and apps, opting instead for a less abrasive mode of connection. We had identified a pain point and helped some folks express their full selves online for the first time. Where the project fell short was further considering accessibility for all disabled people, given how many queer, trans, and non-binary people are also disabled. Beyond my own project, I wondered what the internet, meaning not just these platforms, but the ideas that arise from them, could look like if more Black people of all genders were centered. The vast majority of social sites, apps, and digital platforms are intentionally exclusive, underpinned by white supremacist logics like eugenics, especially for dating platforms. For example, when I attempted to fill out the US Census, which is a colonial project in its own right, there were only 2 binary genders listed online, as expected. Eventually, I opted not to fill it out, frustrated that my gender and thus my personhood were being flattened to fit a government database. During I-Beam's Rapid Response Residency, I took the time and space to imagine what these spaces online could look like if we continue to decolonize our design and creation processes, starting from conception. Obviously, for state-run platforms, this reimagining is simply too much. Recreating would require complete destruction of and abolition of the state as it currently functions, so that it is clear a limit for this toolkit. I started my primary research with Black radical and abolitionist texts and works instead of traditional design models, which favor white, Western, and frankly obsolete logics and practices. From Christina Sharp's In the Wake to all of Hortense Spiller's work and Saidiya Hartman's Scenes of Subjection, as well as Design Justice by MIT's Sasha Costanza-Chock, these were all helpful in this project. I wanted to interrogate the idea of the user, understood as human, white, cis, able, and Western-oriented, usually speaking English, an inherently exclusive and violent label that condenses the possibilities of use use cases, and desired use for any given app or platform. Gender forms and fields are far too rigid. They simply aren't real. A person should be able to opt in or out of expressing their gender online, but if they do choose to disclose, the field can be adaptive and shift based on commonly collected information about a person, such as race, ethnicity, location, region, and how a person is performed or identified based on gender. Gender is fluid and adaptive as we experience it, and I'm curious if some of these cultural signifiers can be replicated on platforms and apps that we use. The goal was to create protocols and more ideal design and development processes and guidelines that will improve our community's online experiences and ultimately shift how development and design teams consider their creation processes. I was continuing that evaluation cycle of what can or should shift or be changed or removed completely to better serve and center queer, trans, and non-binary people, but especially Black people of all genders online. So I created a guide and toolkit that will help individuals, teams, and collectives not only create but update and maintain digital spaces, which include but certainly aren't limited to apps and websites, and hopefully by extension, other digital media like RPGs, role-playing games, visualizations, AR, VR, AI software, and more.
Thank you, Morgan. I think what I find most fascinating about this work in particular is undoing colonization in atypical spaces, that it's even embedded in the reordering of the word thirst to express its true dynamism with satiation and care. So thank you for that, and we look forward to more developments from this app. We continue to enliven the digital landscape with a presentation from Xin Xin, who is an interdisciplinary artist and community organizer working at the intersection of technology, labor, and identity. They are building TogetherNet, a peer-to-peer, P2P messaging app that is an open source communication tool designed for transparency and consent that prioritizes users' digital rights. And this is what Xin Xin had to say. As a participant of social media, they say they have often find themselves caught in between wanting the right to be forgotten and wanting selected content to be displayed in the public space. By making the boundaries between the public and the private explicit, TogetherNet prioritizes users' intentions behind every instance of online communication and sets out to transform digital rights into an embodied practice. Thank you, Xin. Take it away.
Hello, my name is Xin Xin, gender pronouns they, them. I am an artist, community technologist, and educator. I am a Han Taiwanese descendant. I have diamond-shaped face with light olive skin and asymmetrical short hair. So I am here today to talk to you about TogetherNet. It is a communication software designed around the notion of consent and transparency. On the display, there is a pink interface. On the top of that interface, there are two different tabs. The tab on the left says sitting at the park and it's currently active. And the tab on the right, which is inactive, says speaking on the stage. In the center of the interface, there is a green circle. Inside of that green circle, there are 4 different avatars, each represented by a different colored square. They are each also connected to each other through dotted gray lines. One of the avatar had actually triggered a text bubble saying hello. At the bottom of that interface, there is a text input field. There's an option to put your name next to the text input field where you would type your message in, and currently the name is Xin. When I was first beginning to conceptualize this project at my fellowship, I was really trying to ask about what consent means on different levels. What I am listing out on the display here are 5 different keywords, each in its respective purple text bubble, and they're all connected to each other by white curvy lines. The first keyword is freely given. The second one is reversible. The third one is informed. The fourth one is enthusiastic. The fifth word is specific. And each one of these words became a kind of matrix for me to not just assess and evaluate every single design decision that I am making throughout this process, but also really help me to assess the libraries I was using and the different kind of frameworks I decided to adopt versus not adopt, based on thinking about how well and how versatile these frameworks were on responding to these kinds of consentful matrix I have. And so what I ended up with, this is a early stage mock-up of the interface, is that the communication software is going to have 2 different modes of communication. The first mode, which I'm naming sitting at the park here, is really a communication mode that is transmitting over the P2P protocol, and all the messages that gets inserted into this mode will completely evaporate and disappear after the browser closes. So on the display, we again see the interface, the pink interface from the first slide, except now the different avatars have started talking to each other. So the purple avatar says, "Hi everyone." The green avatar asks, "Can you send a link?" And the red avatar says, "togethernet.cargo.site." So these different avatars are able to leave messages on top of this chat interface, almost like drawing. And by drawing next to a different avatar's message, you can create a threaded message. And there are also ways to reach consentful collective decision by drawing and leaving messages on top of each other. The second mode here I have represented by the situation of speaking on a stage, is where one would archive the messages that is being recorded in a meeting. So what we are able to experience on the display here is a white background interface split into half. The portion on the left is representing the archive view, where we're able to scroll through and examine every single messages that has been pushed onto the database that relates and linked to this communication software. On the right, there is a more kind of regular type of text chat where participants are discussing among each other to figure out which speaker to invite. Lastly, I want to briefly discuss the different possible use cases for this software. The kind of users that I have in mind are really people who are working in the arts and in the culture. Maybe they are artists, or maybe they're administrators, or maybe they are event organizers, and it essentially thinking about how this can be a communication tool designed for people working in the art and culture arena. And there are 3 different modes of communication that I am planning right now. The first mode being the facilitated mode, the facilitated meeting, and the second one being the direct action meeting, and the third one being egalitarian. And each of these modes have different kinds of qualities and different types of pros and cons. And one organization might choose to use one mode versus the other, depending on different kinds of situation they find themselves in. So if you are interested in what's being discussed and want to participate, please email me at contact@xin-xin.info. To get further information on the project, you can also visit the website togethernet.cargo.site. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Xing. You know I love an embodied practice, and the expression of multiple layers of consent and of how we relay that information is going to be really necessary going forward. Thank you so much. Our next fellow is Thomas Tajo, who is a blind researcher and disability activist who is researching the establishment of more inclusive and multisensory digital dating platforms, particularly for those who are more reliant on non-visual senses, such as blind and partially sighted people. Those with varying visual abilities due to age, and those who come from oral cultures and people with lower levels of literacy. They are working through interrogating technologies that we use with the intention of expanding inclusivity. And let us welcome Thomas.
I'm Thomas Tajo. I'm a blind researcher, activist, and educator. I'm also the co-founder of new international nonprofit organization, Vision Inclusive. I would like to first thank everybody who has helped out in the project, including iBeam for sponsoring the project. Thank you. Initially, I wanted to look at how visual view of the world in combination with capitalism has shaped online dating, specifically how visual view of human relations and interactions have excluded the involvement of non-visual senses in online dating from the very outset. But today, the visual view has invaded all areas of our lives. Vision has come to invade all areas of our lives to the point of coming to equate seeing with living. We have come to rely on vision for almost everything. And we don't examine this. We don't understand why this happened. We just think that it is natural because we have functioning eyes and we see. So we really don't question how we have come to see and how we have come to trust vision for almost every function in our personal and professional life. And that is what my project sought to understand. I conduct interviews and carried out literature reviews to understand the evolution of visual culture, which has expanded the use of vision into all areas of our lives. I wanted to understand how visual view of the world under visual culture has shaped all areas of our lives across time and cultures. So according to the scientific consensus, visual culture, a culture in which vision is the most trusted sense and vision occupies more important position than all other senses, came about in 15th century West with the invention of print media, namely the inventions of Gutenberg printing press and movable type, the results of which allowed European culture to be transformed from oral to visual or print culture. Previously, cultural knowledge was stored orally and transmitted orally, but now with the use of print media, it was stored on printed pages and transmitted visually through print media in the form of printed words. So that is how visual culture was born according to the scientific consensus. But my research traces the history of visual culture to prehistory, about 100,000 to 40,000 years back, when human beings around the world began to widely control and use fire. So in prehistory, human beings lived under the covers of thick foliage and darkness of the caves, under the covers of dense prehistoric undergrowths. In such environments, we could not rely on vision alone because we could not see very far in the darkness of the prehistoric undergrowths. So we had to rely on all the senses to survive. So in prehistory, there was parity of the senses. All the senses were equally important in keeping us alive. But this changed when human beings widely began to control and use fire. Of course, fire has so many benefits, which I am not going to talk about here. But the biggest impact that fire had on human beings was on the way we use vision. Fire allowed us to extend the use of vision into the night. It allowed vision to colonize the nighttime. We could light up the night. Previously, we relied on all the senses to perceive threats at night and detect dangers at night in combination with vision. But gradually, with the use of fire, we relied more and more on vision to see in the firelight and detect the dangers. And that is how vision gradually replaced the functions of non-visual senses and took over the nighttime. Fire was later used to clear the forest and establish the earliest human settlements in the clearings. So this allowed vision to see over a wider area of land and a longer stretch of space, and allowed us to extend the use of vision over wider space. So that is how the use of fire allowed human beings to extend the use of vision over time and space, and gave birth to the prehistoric visual culture, which allowed us to extend the use of vision into new areas of life by replacing the functions of non-visual senses. So print media of 15th century West did not give birth to visual culture, but it only expanded the scope of visual culture, extended the use of vision into new areas of life, new areas of social and cultural life. The invention of print media made the books cheap and easily available to the masses. So within the covers of printed pages, there was a world of pure vision in which you only needed vision to inhabit. In this world of pure vision, you only needed vision to navigate through the landscape of printed words. Non-visual senses were removed to the borders, to the margins, outside the covers of the printed pages. Their intrusion was seen as undesirable, and they were considered distractions, which gave birth to the politics of the senses. We also made efforts to extend the realm of vision beyond the covers of printed pages, and that is how we started building libraries and studies to house the books, the spaces within which non-visual senses were largely excluded, and that is how we extended the realm of vision beyond the covers of printed pages into larger environment, which gave birth to the modern visual architecture. So this brings us to our digital age of today. According to Marshall McLuhan in the Gutenberg Galaxy, he said that human beings not only invent technologies, but they are in turn reinvented by the technologies when they use them. So human beings, by using visual technologies of fire and print media, reinvented himself as a visual being. So the visual view of visual humanity has shaped all areas of our lives today, including the design and building of digital technologies and digital media. So vision was expanded into new areas of life with the use of fire, which was later expanded into new areas of social and cultural life with the print media. But today, digital media has allowed us to extend the realm of vision into all areas of professional and personal life. Today, we have extended the use of vision beyond any vision which we previously had. So today, vision has invaded into all areas of our lives, and we have come to rely on vision for everything. So this is creating problems for us because we are seeing ourselves to blind. Many studies show that there is increasing numbers of people suffering from overuse of vision. About 50 to 90% of people who use digital screens suffer from computer vision syndrome, digital eye strain. So under visual culture, which has been expanded by digital technologies and digital media, vision is working 24/7. It never gets a rest. So in the process, we are overusing vision and seeing ourselves to blind. But the use of vision in the form of digital screens at night has also affected our health. So millions of people are suffering from lack of sleep because of using digital screens at night before going to sleep. And we are suffering from many ill effects that results from lack of sleep, including not having REM sleep, which is necessary for healthy memory, which affects our circadian rhythm, causes obesity, affects our cognitive functioning. But the visual view of the world requires making the world visible, and that is why we have lit up the world from homes to streets, from cities to villages, from urban to forests. So world has become an object of vision, which has become problematic not just for human beings, for the whole planet, for the ecology, for plants and animals. So that is in brief what research I have conducted in this first phase. And you can get more details later in from my booklet, which I am working to write and publish later in the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. You really remind us in that presentation of the varied intelligences that we have access to, but have possibly left untapped. Even expanding the presence of multiple cultures. And then the parity of the senses, that's gonna stick with me for a bit. How are we doing, everyone? I want to say that we've gone through 3 presentations so far, and would invite you to let's take a deep breath in and let it out and shake it out a little bit, shake it out a little bit. Do one more breath in and let it out. Awesome. Thanks for doing that with me. I needed that for a little bit. Our next presentation looks similarly at this function of sense to arrive at places of parity and pleasure. Christopher Clary is an artist and curator, queering tech culture through new media. His ongoing project, The Chrissy Show, is a talk show streamed live on Chat-Your-Bait, an adult website for cammers that interrogates the technology with which sex work is often entangled. Through solo shows, guest interviews, and audience participation. The key themes that Christopher's working through are using technology to disrupt, protest, and reframe the digital spaces of sex work. Hello, Christopher.
Hi, my name is Christopher Clary, and I'm an artist and curator working the intersection of sex and tech. So this photo I'm sharing is of the Presidio Modelo prison in Cuba that was built in the 1920s based on an 18th century idea of the Panopticon, which is a circular building with a tower in the middle designed so that inmates are conditioned to act as though they're always being watched. Here's a pic from the inside, and now a close-up. I'm starting with a panopticon because many people reference it when talking about surveillance capitalism. But I really want us to look closer here because there's something else going on. The watchtower is graffitied and weeds are sprouting up everywhere. So I ask, might this be culture and nature growing on top of very old ideas that have failed us then and now? From this ruin, I see hope. Now I'm showing you the homepage of Chaturbate. It's a grid of boxes, not hope. It's also the largest adult live streaming platform for webcam models who perform online for cash. The site also includes many other supporting communities like viewers, technologists, business people, studios, researchers, academics, and artists like me. Hi, I'm now appearing in one of the boxes. I have white skin, short hair, and a long goatee. Chaturbate, instead of bringing people together, categorizes, ranks, colors, and isolates us. Those who labor here have no guarantee of getting tipped a single token, and that's just 5 cents of a $1 billion market. Stripped back, it's a gig economy with a gambling overlay. So what would happen if we left our rooms, saw each other, and asked, why does this look like a panopticon and feel like carcinal technology? And where are the weeds? Let's click through to my room and maybe, hopefully, we'll find a weed. Hi again. Here we are sitting in my basement gaming room. I'm in black and white, and the TV behind me is in neon green, and there's a chat box also. So The Chrissy Show is a talk show about webcam culture. We debuted on Chaturbate in March 2020, partly in response to COVID. In fact, sex was in the news then and still is because we're having more or less of it. And some of the 50 million who are in the US who are unemployed have turned to camming to earn a living. Now, more than ever, there is a need to provide space and time for the communities of Chaturbate to come together and share their stories, all while questioning the technology itself. The show broadcasts 4 days a week, and we cam from anywhere in Chrissy's house, including a blow-up pool, as a way to make the guests and audience feel comfortable. Because we're usually naked, sometimes masturbating, while chatting about anything from gender and race to pizza and tattoos. It's smart and dumb, perverse and boring, and weirdly intimate. The medium is changing us. But instead of just hoping for good, the plan is to exit Chaturbate. First, we'll tour the Chrissy Show in real life to various cultural institutions. An example event would be a 24-hour show about digisexuality, and that's those who have physical and or emotional relations to technology. We would feature Henry, an AI male sex doll, and Vex Ruby, a virtual cam girl. Human guests would include Professor Kate Devlin, a specialist on human-computer interactions, and Zach Blass, an IBM alum who's been researching teledildonics as it relates to contrasexuality. Lastly, all of this talk will inform us in our plan to co-create a camming platform. In fact, we plan to use the same white label solution that Chaturbate uses, but making it way, way better by and for sex-positive communities. Along the way, we'll ask ourselves, what would camming look like queered or as a nonprofit? So I'm going to leave you with a clip. The Chrissy Show spent a very intense week with sex worker and sex educator Ted D. Bastian, mostly chatting about trauma and mental health. But those stories we're going to have to save for another time when I have an hour to share. Instead, I'm going to share the final scene of our bubble bath. Chrissy is in black and white with an iPad in the foreground showing Ted in color. We're both in bathtubs. Ted has white skin, short red hair, and a big beard. And please note, we're semi-nude here. So thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
That's funny.
This is really relaxed.
Yeah, speaking of art, when I was a kid, I never really understood art, but I was always fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing to do was that I didn't consider it art at the time, but now looking back, I do. But I used to photograph like flowers, animals, insects,
Oh, totally.
And I still do it today whenever I travel, whenever I go places.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always photographing flowers and, different insects that are on the flowers, or mushrooms and different funguses.
Yeah.
Or different parts of nature that I find fascinating.
Well, I've even heard you like read poetry in your room, which I think is amazing. I love how we're just so fucking, it's so relaxing.
Thank you so much, Chris. Wow. You really offer a reminder of protest through refusal, and that the next phase may be allowing a collective slowdown in order to move forward. We're doing the work, even if it's framed outside of the typical. So really appreciate that offering. Our next presentation comes from Veil Machine. It's a collaborative project where Niko, Flux, Sybil, Fury, and MJ Tom are creating a new form of digital riot to challenge SESTA, FOSTA, and Earn It, laws that threaten the safety of sex workers and free speech online. The self-destructing protest platform Eviction was a virtual hub for sex workers, artists, clients, and allies, partaking in a virtual art house or gallery. They are thinking the themes of centering community needs, knowledge, and care. Let's hear from Veil Machine.
Veil Machine is a sex worker artist collective. Its core producers are Sybil Fury, Niko Flux, and MJ Tom, but it also includes a Rolodex of satellite contributors and works frequently with sibling organizations such as Kink Out Events and Hacking Hustling. At Veil Machine's core is the question, when we frame sex work as a radical art practice, what new worlds emerge as possible? Our first event, Eviction, is a prime example of that investigation. Eviction was a direct response to anti-sex work, anti-internet freedom legislation such as SESTA FOSTA and the Earn It Act, which exacerbate the impossibility of sex worker survival during COVID-19. We are forced to work, commune, and resist online despite being targets of pervasive surveillance and deplatforming. Eviction intentionally violated that legislation through hosting of sex worker ads, resources, and performances before preemptively self-destructing after 12 hours in an act of protest. Let's take a walkthrough of what that platform and event looked like. After reading through the community agreements on the cover page, the reader was taken to the main page of the site. On the left are a series of text listings reminiscent of Craigslist or Backpage. These listings could take you to a performer profile, to sex worker resources or mutual aid funds, could link to .pdf files of gender and critical theory readings that inform this work, or other Easter eggs. At the top were links to two other tabs, the About page, which credited our prolific team, and the Performer page, which credited our incredible cast of performers and also listed the lineup at the bottom. Here, you can scroll through a carousel of performers. And here is an example of a performer profile for Cherub IRL. On the right, you can find images of that performer, and on the left is their bio as well as all of their relevant links, such as links to their professional website, paid subscription sites, and social media. Now, the text listings on the main page included a Happening Now window of all the live performances that were occurring in that moment, the digital equivalent of a red light district. Clicking on each of the performer thumbnails would take the visitor to a Zoom room to watch the performances. This is a still of a Zoom performance by Messy Darla, who is a wet and messy fetish performer. According to tips from the audience members, she pops huge balloons of paint over her body. She's shown here in a trough of very wildly colored paint with her hand in between her spread legs. This is a Zoom performance by Kiara Kaki, an Atlanta-based cam performer. Her ass is facing the camera and she is smiling over her shoulder with a projection of a TV show on the wall behind her. This is a blurry close-up of Minxie Lopez's performance, with a chat window open to show how people would have to collectively interact and tip to be rewarded, to show more of their performance, or to request specific acts. This is a screenshot of Empress Wu / MJ Tom's Zoom performance, in which they asked audience members to change their profile pictures to a photo of them to imitate a recent catfishing experience, and then to collectively participate in writing a love letter to their catfish. Around 30 minutes before the event ended, the visitor would be redirected to a live stream of performers. The live stream would be consistently interrupted by premeditated pop-ups that commented on desire, privacy, and censorship. Any attempt to go back to the main page would result in glitches and infections, and would then redirect back to the live stream. This self-destruction wrestled control away from the user to illustrate the threat of censorship and deplatforming that sex workers experience on a daily basis. Some texts from these pop-ups are taken directly from community guidelines, violation notices of online platforms such as Instagram and GiftRocket, which is a money transfer service. This specific pop-up reads, "Your existence may be deleted. Some of your previous actions didn't follow our community guidelines. If you learn and follow our guidelines, you can prevent your existence from being deleted. Except we enforce our guidelines however we please, so you never really know if you're crossing the line. You'll just keep going like this, always in fear of that day when you'll be shut down, never really knowing when that day will come. If you think we're making a mistake, too bad, because there's not a single thing that you can do about it. That's right, you can't do anything to stop it." At midnight Eastern Standard Time, the site disappeared and was replaced with the blue screen of death page that read, "Network error." This page also included links to more information about sex worker censorship compiled by the organization Hacking Hustling. Any visit to eviction.net still links to this page. The event was written about in news outlets such as Vice, Dazed Digital, and Paper Magazine, as well as the Daily Dot, among others. Sex workers from across the US and around the world responded to the show, saying it brought them to tears and that they felt so seen and moved by the digital installation. The show itself also raised over $16,000 for a 30-person cast of crew of POC and queer sex workers, creating an underground hub for sex workers to make money in the process. In the creation of this event, we amassed a rather large archive that includes all of the ephemera from the actual event, as well as all the ways in which the project was censored during its construction. We received multiple notices from Instagram, were suspended from Twitch, and the article written about eviction in Forbes magazine was taken down hours after posting. With all of the ephemera we have collected, we are interested in starting a collective archive or museum for sex workers to access, something borderless and dynamic that circumvents the limits of online surveillance through creative storytelling, the type demonstrated in eviction.
Wow, thank you so much, Veil Machine. The reframing of eviction is deliberate and artistic, thoughtful, and values intention. I think I'm most taken by the creation of a specific space to offer previously unseen procedures, right? Culture, and that this is truly radical. Our next fellow knows about radical spaces. Rashaad Newsome is an interdisciplinary artist whose work blends several practices, including collage, sculpture, film, photography, music, computer programming, software engineering, community organizing, and performance. His current project, Being 1.5, is an app that directly addresses the lack of mental health care in the African American community. As a side note, Rashaad really would like to center Black voices in this work, so he is only taking questions from people of African descent. You can also get in touch with the artist later directly via social media or email, which we will share following the presentation. Thank you, Rashaad, and let's hear from you.
My name is Rashaad Newsome. I am an interdisciplinary artist, and my project is called Being 1.5, an artificial intelligence therapy app that will help Black people navigate trauma stemming from racial microaggressions. Being 1.5, also known as the BDG app, was a direct response to rage, anxiety, and depression that so many Black Americans and I felt in the wake of the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, insert Black name, of many more Black folks this year. Sadly, this type of despondency is all too familiar to us as the consequence of existing in a systemic racist environment. In the words of author James Baldwin, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a state of rage almost all of the time. Being 1.5 is an effort to make online mental health care broadly accessible to the Black community by leveraging the possibilities of machine learning technology created by and for Black people. Initially, my hopes were that Being could tackle major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder, which my research suggests that the Black community is 20% more likely to experience. Through my phase 1 research, I consulted with several Black therapists, including Dr. Aja Hill, Dr. Serenica T. Albert, and several doctors from the Black Minds Matter UK cohort. For those meetings, I concluded that an AI-driven web/mobile app is unlikely to have a major beneficial effect on deeply embedded psychosis. However, the app has enormous potential to mitigate trauma stemming from daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities like racial microaggressions. In August and September 2020, I interviewed 22 cis, trans, and non-binary identified Black people from various socioeconomic backgrounds and diverse sexual orientations. I interviewed each subject individually for 45 to 60 minutes via Zoom or phone to assess if there was a need for an app and realistic ways to reduce harm. Most interviewees did not currently have therapists. Because of systemic racism, there is an imbalance in socioeconomic conditions for Black Americans, which leads to inadequate or non-existent healthcare, thus complicating one's ability to seek professional help for such conditions. Interviews welcomed the concept of a 24-hour access to a virtual therapist as a means of offloading emotions, and were very open to speaking with an avatar as long as it could provide them with an experience akin to a human therapist. Non-binary in their presentation and their approach to their work, Being 1.5 is a combination of virtual assistant, life coach, and therapist. Being 1.5 will use a unique set of skills to help users manage trauma from racial microaggressions. This complicated work will be done using a unique language processing model, including insight into text through topic modeling, relationship extraction, entity resolution, semantic search, and event detection. Being 1.5 will include a newly designed interactive avatar whose body language and facial expressions correlate with the processing of complex algorithms and their results. Intricate algorithms will assure the avatar appears to be genuinely concerned and listening when engaged. When delivering their strategies for trauma management, they will do so with affirming and inspiring gesticulation. This gesticulation will be sourced using mocap from actual Black therapists. These expressions will be supported with autonomous sensory meridian response tactics, such as visual and audio cues that evoke relaxation. In addition to virtual therapy, Being 1.5 will offer users physical therapy. 30 to 45-minute activities like walking, running, stretching, weightlifting, and boxing will be accompanied by inspiring conversation on various strategies to help users decolonize their minds and imaginations. Daily affirmations. The app will deliver morning and evening email and/or text of positive statements that can help users challenge and overcome self-sabotaging and negative thoughts. Virtual meditation therapy. Users can experience relaxation and consciousness expansion by focusing on a mantra or a keyword, sound, or image while eliminating outside stimuli. Virtual group dance therapy. Virtual dance parties that will be organized in collaboration with Black DJs from around the world. This form of therapy draws inspiration from the diaspora rather than Eurocentric forms of healing. As Black people have spent so much time engaging in internal dialogue to navigate systemic racism, virtual group dance parties offer an opportunity to get out of the mind and move the body as a form of therapy. Additional avatars will be made available to people with disabilities, and they will be able to use their eyes to animate the avatar and join into the session. The suffering that results from racial microaggressions leads to comorbid disorders with depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation being the most common. Countless other African Americans and I experience this type of violence daily, and we regularly have to navigate the resulting grief alone. We often resort to the method of internal dialogue to avoid further ridicule and scrutiny. What would it look like if there was a technology that could provide folk with a safe space for the emotional Black voice to be heard rather than suppressed, where we can be calmed, connected, affirmed, and inspired? This will be the distinct role of Being 1.5. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rashaad. As all the fellows have expressed, ephemera is not uncritical, but articulates the critical link between the embodied self and the digital network, new spaces and new strategies throughout. On the screen, you'll see all of the fellows' contact information, and we thank everyone for their wonderful presentations. Thank you, iBeam, and I take it back to you all.
Thanks so much, Jerron, and thanks to everyone for attending and to the inspiring, incredible artists that presented their work today. It's a real pleasure and a real treat. I would like to invite you all to join us every day this week at noon for presentations by all 30 of the Rapid Response Fellows. We have more presentations tomorrow and Friday, and then on Saturday, we'll be announcing the recipients of the $25,000 Phase 2 award with a special panel conversation with leading cultural and civic leaders. I hope you'll all tune in for that. Again, thanks, Jerron, for hosting. Thanks to the team at iBeam for doing such a fantastic job of producing this marathon week of what I've dubbed iBeam TV. It's been just a real amazing chance to see some incredible inventive work. And I hope all of you have a great rest of the day wherever you are. And we look forward to seeing you again.